If you want to know why the England rugby team transformed from just a middle-of-the-pack squad into the 2003 World Cup champions, don't look at their training camps.
Right.
Like, don't look at the weight room, and definitely don't look at the playbook. You actually need to look at their stationery.
They're stationary. Yeah, it sounds completely absurd when you frame it like that.
Because the coach who orchestrated that entire miraculous turnaround believed, quite literally, that the difference between international sporting glory and total failure came down to, well, whether a grown professional athlete remembered to bring his own pen to a morning meeting.
Which is wild, but it gets right to the heart of how we usually misunderstand success. We are so obsessed with the movie montage version of high performance.
Oh, absolutely. We want the loud locker room speech.
Exactly. The soaring music, the single blinding moment of tactical genius.
We want the lightning strike right. But when you study actual sustained excellence, whether that's on a rugby pitch, in a corporate boardroom, or even just navigating the daily grind of a high school boarding house, that Hollywood image just completely shatters.
It really does. You aren't looking for a lightning strike at all. You are looking at a system.
Right. Thousands of tiny, ordinary, almost invisible decisions made consistently over years.
Yeah, decisions about how you manage your own preparation, how you interact with the people around you, and how you curate the environment you live in. High performance isn't an event. I mean, it's an ecosystem.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that ecosystem is exactly what we are exploring today for you, the listener.
Yeah, it's a great topic.
We are jumping into a fascinating document for this deep dive. It's titled, What a Boarder Can Learn from Sir Clive Woodward.
And it is packed with insights.
It really is. The mission today is to take the very specific coaching architecture that built a World Cup winning rugby team and map it directly onto your daily life.
Right, because the source focuses heavily on a boarding school student's life. But frankly, if you share a living space, work on a team, or just want to stop getting in your own way, this completely applies to you.
Totally.
And the foundational argument the source makes is crucial. You don't close the gap between being ranked 6th in the world and being the undisputed best by just, acquiring better raw talent.
Which is what everyone assumes you do.
Right. Instead, you bridge that gap by entirely rewriting the baseline of what is considered acceptable on a random Tuesday morning.
But before we get into his actual rules, like the whole pen thing, we really have to understand the architect.
We do.
Because Sir Clive Woodward was not your standard whistle-around-the-neck, lifelong sports coach. His foundation was radically different.
Very different.
He was born in 1956, son of an RAF pilot. And his early education, well, the source calls it unconventional, which feels like a massive understatement.
Oh, definitely an understatement.
Yeah, his father didn't want him pursuing professional football, so he sent him to HMS Conway.
Right, and we need to pause on HMS Conway because it wasn't a traditional school with brick buildings and ivy and, sprawling green lawns.
At all.
It was a literal school ship, a training vessel for the Merchant Navy and Royal Navy officers, and it was just moored in the Menai Strait in North Wales.
Just imagine the sheer claustrophobia of that. You're a teenager living on a boat in Wales in the 1970s.
Stuck there.
Yeah, you can't just walk away from a bad roommate or avoid someone you had an argument with. You're physically confined in a tight, shared, highly disciplined space.
It's intense.
And the document actually notes a fascinating biographical detail from his time on that ship. Woodward played rugby at center alongside a fly half named Ian Duncan Smith, who later became the leader of the UK Conservative Party.
And just to jump in, the source includes that not to make a point about political ideology at all.
Right.
We are certainly not analyzing his politics or endorsing any sides here. It's just to illustrate the kind of intense, rigid, highly structured peer group he came of age in.
Yeah, it was crucible.
Exactly. That environment fundamentally shaped his understanding of what it means to live in a shared space. He learned that discipline isn't something a teacher occasionally enforces.
It's just the absolute prerequisite for coexistence when you're stuck on a ship together.
Right, you have to have
That makes total sense. Forced accountability. So he survives the ship, goes to Loughborough University, gets a sports science degree, and has a great playing career.
He plays for Harlequins, Leicester, wins 21 caps for England.
Yeah, he's part of the 1980 Grand Slam winning team. But then we hit the detail that completely reframed this whole story for me.
Oh, the business side.
Yes. During his prime playing years, rugby wasn't a fully professionalized sport in the way it is today. So he wasn't making his living exclusively on the pitch. He was a businessman.
A highly successful one, too. He spent 9 years working for Rank Xerox in the UK and Australia.
And he later set up his own computer leasing company in Maidenhead.
Right. And Rank Xerox in the 80s and 90s was famous for its aggressive, highly structured corporate sales culture.
So he is completely seeped in corporate hierarchies, key performance indicators, and systemic management.
Exactly. So when he gets appointed as England's first full-time professional head coach in September 1997, he isn't bringing a typical coach's mindset. He's bringing a CEO's mindset directly to the grass.
And the ROI on that mindset was just unprecedented. I mean, he inherits this disjointed team ranked 6th globally.
Oh, wow.
Between 2000 and 2003, they compile a record of 41 wins out of 46 matches.
That's insane.
They secured 22 consecutive victories at Twickenham, 3 Six Nations titles, a Grand Slam. And they culminate that run by winning the 2003 World Cup in Sydney, sealed by that iconic Jonny Wilkinson drop goal in extra time.
Such a legendary moment. And he later adapted this exact operational system for Team GB across 3 separate Olympic Games.
Which forces the question, right? If it's not just getting better players, how do you manufacture that level of dominance?
Well, you start by defining very clearly what you consider to be a cardinal sin within your culture. And for Woodward, the ultimate sin was being what he called soft.
Which brings us back to the pen. The famous rucksack rule.
Yes, the rucksack rule.
Woodward instituted a non-negotiable policy. Every single player had to bring their own rucksack to every team meeting. Inside that rucksack, they had to have a pen, a notepad, and their own drinks.
And here is the kicker. The team's massive, highly paid support staff were strictly banned from providing or laying out these items.
Wow.
The players were 100% responsible for arriving prepared. If you walked into a room and expected a bottle of water to be waiting for you, Woodward deemed you soft.
Okay, I have to push back on this because it sounds kind of unbearable.
Oh, I know.
I mean, these are 17-stone titans of the sport. They're international celebrities at the peak of their athletic prime. And you're treating them like middle schoolers. Like, did you bring your pencil, Johnny?
Right, it feels petty.
It feels like micromanaging a group project. Isn't that just petty tyranny?
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology. He wasn't micromanaging their stationery. He was running a continuous low-grade diagnostic test. He was filtering for accountability. Think about the stakes of a World Cup final.
Right.
If a player cannot be trusted to manage the incredibly simple, low-stakes task of bringing a notepad to a Tuesday morning video session, how on earth can a coach trust them to execute a complex, high-stakes defensive realignment in the 79th minute of a tied championship game?
Ah, okay. So it's a proxymetry. He's not measuring the pen, he's measuring the mindset.
Precisely. There's a brilliant anecdote in the source about Jason Robinson. Robinson was a legendary player who transitioned from rugby league to rugby union, which is a massive cultural and tactical shift.
Yeah, totally different games, really.
So he comes into Woodward's camp, and what does he do? He shows up to his first meetings with this massive notepad, and he is frantically writing absolutely everything down.
He didn't just bring the minimum required equipment, he actively utilized it to close his own knowledge gap.
And Woodward saw that and immediately knew Robinson was a culture fit. The notebook told him more than a fitness test ever could.
Let's translate this directly to the listener. If you are a student in a boarding house, the rucksack isn't just about having a geometry set.
Exactly.
It's walking into an evening prep session having already reviewed your notes, so you aren't wasting the first 20 minutes figuring out what you're supposed to be doing.
Yes. Or if we look at shared living spaces, it's walking into the common room, seeing a dirty mug you didn't leave there, and washing it anyway.
Right, without waiting for the housemaster to yell at everyone.
That is the perfect analogy, because Woodward's players weren't terrified of a fine for forgetting a pen. They were terrified of looking around the room and realizing they were the only one who hadn't bothered to prepare.
Oh, letting down the collective.
Exactly. When you bring your rucksack, you are making a silent declaration to your peers about the standards you uphold.
So the rucksack handles the microenvironment. It forces the individual to control their own personal radius of responsibility. But you can't fit a foreign stadium in a rucksack.
No, you definitely can't.
How do you prepare an athlete or a student for the massive, suffocating pressure of an environment they've never been in before?
You have to systematically eliminate the novelty of that environment. You literally manufacture familiarity.
Which brings us to the Perth detour. I genuinely love this story because it sounds so counterproductive at first.
It really does.
So, the lead up to the 2003 World Cup. England knows their opening matches are going to be played in Perth, Western Australia. None of the squad have played there.
Right.
So Woodward is bringing the team back from a grueling, exhausting tour of the Southern Hemisphere. The players are desperate to go home to their families in the UK.
They're completely wiped out.
But Woodward reroutes the entire squad to stop in Perth for a few days.
And importantly, they weren't going there to run drills or tackle each other. They didn't go for physical conditioning.
Right. They went just to look around. They walked the route from the team hotel to the stadium. They checked out the locker rooms.
Figuring out where the local coffee shops were.
Yeah, where they could get a decent breakfast, how firm the hotel beds were. And the players were furious. They hated it.
Of course they did. They were physically depleted.
So wait, if I'm playing devil's advocate again, if they are physically exhausted from a tour, wouldn't a sports scientist prioritize sleep and physical recovery over dragging them through hotel lobbies and coffee shops?
You would think so.
Isn't physical burnout a bigger threat than not knowing where Starbucks is?
Here's where it gets really interesting for the listener. If we connect this to the bigger picture of how the human brain processes stress, Woodward was actually protecting their energy, just a different kind of energy.
Okay, break that down for me.
He was obsessively focused on cognitive load and decision fatigue. The brain uses a tremendous amount of glucose and energy just to process novel environments.
Like sensory overload.
Exactly. Think about when you go to your regular grocery store, you can breeze through it in 10 minutes while thinking about a podcast because your brain has mapped it.
Yeah, I know exactly where the cereal is.
But if you go to a brand new grocery store in a different town, suddenly you have to actively search for the milk, decode the aisle signs, and navigate a new layout. When you leave, you feel disproportionately tired.
Yes.
Yeah.
A 20-minute shop feels like it took 2 hours of intense focus.
Because unfamiliarity drains cognitive reserves.
Yeah.
Every new variable, the temperature of the locker room, the acoustics of the stadium, the traffic on the bus route, places a microtax on the player's attention.
Oh, I see.
Woodward knew that if his players were spending mental energy adjusting to the environment on the morning of a World Cup match, they would have a fraction of a second less processing speed on the pitch. The Perth detour was about paying that cognitive tax months in advance.
Wow. And visiting Perth early is a concept you can apply to literally anything that causes performance anxiety.
Exactly. What do you think is the boarding house equivalent of the Perth detour?
Oh, it's sitting a practice exam in the actual hall where the final will be, rather than comfortably on your bed with music playing.
Yes.
It's putting on the scratchy school uniform, setting a timer, and removing the shock of the room. By the time the real exam starts, your brain isn't processing the echo of the hall, it's only processing the physics questions.
Or if you have a massive presentation for work or a club, you don't just read the slides in your head. You go to the physical room the night before.
Oh, totally.
You stand where you're going to stand. You click through the slides on the actual projector. You are preloading the environment so that when the audience arrives, the only variable left is your delivery.
You're doing 100 things 1% better.
Exactly. Marginal gains.
But here is the reality check. You can pack the perfect rucksack. You can visit Perth a month early and map every coffee shop, and you can still fail.
Oh, absolutely.
Perfect preparation mitigates risk. It doesn't eliminate it. So what happens when those 1% optimizations still result in a loss?
That is where the system transitions from a set of rules to a state of mind. Woodward operated under the conviction that the system cannot carry passengers.
No free ride.
Right. He believed that great teams are ultimately made of great individuals who are obsessed with their own evolution.
He had a mantra for this, actually. I never lose. I either win or learn.
Which, sounds like a standard motivational poster.
It really does, like something you'd see in a dentist's office.
Yeah, until you realize how painfully they had to apply it. The team that won the 2003 World Cup didn't have a magical, unbroken run of perfection. They suffered a devastating, heartbreaking loss in the semifinal of the 1999 World Cup. They had moments of total public failure.
And it's easy to say, I never lose, when you're winning 41 out of 46 matches. It's much, much harder when you've just been knocked out of a tournament.
But that's when the philosophy is actually tested. Woodward didn't allow the team to just mourn the 1999 loss and move on. He forced them to dissect it.
Break it all down.
Every painful failure had to produce a concrete, actionable change to their tactics or their daily habits. Failure was just aggressively acquired data.
I love that phrase. Aggressively acquired data. If a student is listening to this and they've just bombed an assessment or a project they led totally collapsed, the natural instinct is to just Shove the graded paper into the bottom of the bag, feel terrible about it, and try to forget it happened.
Which guarantees you will make the exact same mistake again.
Right. Relentless learning means taking that failure, walking up to the teacher or the boss, and explicitly asking, what specifically separated this work from being excellent? What is the exact mechanical flaw in my approach?
You have to strip the emotion out of the failure.
You really do.
It also means treating the success of your peers as open source information. If you live in a boarding house, you are surrounded by a laboratory of different study habits and routines.
Yeah, everybody operates differently.
If the person in the room next to you is consistently acing their exams while staying perfectly calm, relentless learning means knocking on their door and asking how they're doing it.
You hijack their systems. You treat their methods as free data.
Exactly. But there's a catch to all of this. Bringing a rucksack, visiting Perth, treating failure as data, none of these are permanent fixes if they're just one-off events.
Right. Doing it once isn't enough.
They have to become the ambient temperature of the room. This raises an important question. Where does this standard actually live when the coach isn't watching?
Well, Woodward was notoriously blunt about this. He said, a winning culture isn't about the values portrayed on your company website. It's about the behaviors demonstrated by your people on a daily basis.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, mission statements printed on glossy posters in a hallway accomplish absolutely nothing. A coach giving a roaring speech doesn't create culture.
It just creates temporary adrenaline.
Exactly. Culture is the accumulated heavy weight of what people do in the most ordinary, unglamorous moments.
It's what happens in the space between the big events. Like in a boarding school context, culture isn't the headmaster's assembly on the first day of term.
Yeah.
Culture is what happens on a random Tuesday evening in November. It's raining outside, the heating is rattling, everyone has coursework due, and everyone is tired and irritable.
Tuesday's culture. That is the moment of truth.
Yes. When someone drops a piece of trash in the hallway on that miserable Tuesday, does a senior student pick it up? Do they tell the younger student to pick it up? Or do they all just step over it because they are tired?
It's so telling.
If they step over it, I don't care what your website says, your culture is stepping over trash.
Because the England team didn't win the World Cup because Woodward was terrifying. They won it because the players eventually enforced the standards on each other.
They owned it.
If a player showed up without a pen, it wasn't Woodward who had to yell at him. The other players would handle it because that player was disrespecting the collective effort of the group. When a community owns its standards, the culture becomes a self-sustaining engine.
So what does this all mean for you? Whether you are navigating the intense social dynamics of a boarding house dorm, managing a corporate team, or just trying to establish better habits in your own apartment, your environment is entirely a product of your daily micro-choices.
Yeah. To synthesize the blueprint we've uncovered, first, you have to pack your rucksack. Define what personal responsibility looks like for you, and refuse to be soft by expecting others to lay the groundwork.
Absolutely.
Second, visit Perth early. Identify the variables that drain your cognitive load and manage them before the pressure hits.
Get out ahead of it.
Third, adopt a stance of relentless learning. Strip the ego out of failure and use it as data. And finally, you have to actively build your Tuesday culture through consistent, unglamorous behavior.
Because at the end of the day, Woodward's stated ambition wasn't actually just to collect trophies. He said his ultimate goal was to create an environment so dynamic, so supportive, and so excellent that everyone wants to be a part of it and nobody ever wants to leave.
Which is the exact definition of a thriving boarding house or a highly functional team. It's a place that demands your best, but completely supports you in achieving it.
It really reframes how much agency you have over your surroundings. But I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Okay.
Throughout this deep dive, we have talked almost exclusively about teams, shared spaces, boarding houses, locker rooms, peer accountability.
We have, yeah.
But what happens when the team is just you? How do you maintain that Tuesday culture when you are both the leader and the only follower?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Think about your own bedroom or your solitary study habits. When the door is closed, when there is no peer pressure to perform, and when absolutely no one else is watching, are you still packing your own rucksack?
That is the ultimate test. It's one thing to not let down your teammates. It's entirely another to refuse to let down yourself.
It's the hardest game to win. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep packing those rucksacks, keep learning from the losses, and we will catch you next time.